Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I get to simplify the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. Hey, in today's episode, I want to talk with you about destiny, or more specifically, how you can alter your destiny. I don't know whether that's accurate, but I'm not an expert on some of the more theological things there too, but you'll get kind of where I'm going with this. Now, let me tell you why I think today's episode is super important, particularly at the time of me kind of posting this. It's 20th of September that I'm recording this today. You'll get to listen to it next week. But there's a lot of uncertainty that's happening in the world at the moment, particularly economically. There are changes happening over in Europe with the ongoing war between Russia and the Ukraine and the impact that's having on gas and oil supplies. There are changes in interest rates. There are a decrease in jobs. There's more uncertainty happening financially across the world. And this is causing a lot of challenges for a lot of us. And how these next few years might look is not destiny. It'll be different for all of us. And we get to have a real role or play a real role in how that looks. What will your practice look like? Will you thrive in the coming years? Is it even possible? Who would have thought that during COVID, with the level of shutdown that there was some practices that were busier than ever? Interesting. I know my practice, I've said this many times, even with the significant shutdowns that we had in Melbourne over that time, our revenue actually increased. When we were allowed to be open, we were very, very busy. And we also had a lot of the time, almost a third of the year, kind of shut down. Very interesting there as well. Now, what kind of gave me the idea to start talking about this is I am rereading at the moment Nathaniel Branden's The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem. It is a book that for a long time I kind of read every year. In fact, more often than not, I actually re-listen to the audiobook. But I'm rereading it again at the moment. And I'm reminded about how brilliant Nathaniel Branden is. He's often referred to as the father of self-esteem. He was one of the very first to be starting to talk about it in a time where it wasn't cool to be talking about self-esteem, right back in the 50s and the 60s. So inside of this book, there was a quote that really captured my attention. I'm going to read that to you now. And he's talking about self-concept, or maybe this could be self-identity. So Nathaniel goes on to say, self-concept is destiny, or more precisely, it tends to be. Our self-concept is who and what we consciously and subconsciously think we are. Our physical and psychological traits, our assets, our liabilities, our possibilities and limitations, our strengths and weaknesses. Now, let me give you my version of that, and that is, your self-concept is the sum total of all the stories that you tell yourself about who you are, where you fit in the world, and what you're capable of. So remember, inside of Nathaniel's definition with that too, he says it's what we consciously and subconsciously think we are. It's not what we necessarily are, it's what we think we are. And when I talk about the idea of it being the sum total of all the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are, I use that word stories, but I could equally use the word belief as well. Now, again, that's a word I choose very purposely to reflect the somewhat transient nature of it, because whether or not these stories or beliefs are true or not doesn't really matter. If you believe them, it's almost, as Nathaniel talks about, it's what creates our dentistry. There you go, our destiny, or most of the time. So how your practice will cope in the coming years will be more a reflection of your self-identity than it will be of the actual environment itself. And if your practice is to thrive, there are a couple of frameworks I want to share with you that I think will be really helpful in helping to mold your self-identity, your self-concept, that will perhaps push you towards the results of a practice that might be more likely to thrive than it is to one that might have a really difficult time over those years. Now, this first concept I heard just recently, I've not ever heard it referred like this. I often teach it in another way. And it's the idea of the difference between, are you a thermometer or are you a thermostat? I love this as a concept. When I heard it immediately, I went, that's brilliant. You've probably heard of it before. I'm often a bit slow on the uptake of these things too. But both these devices, a thermometer and a thermostat, both measure the temperature. But what they do from then on is very, very different. So if we look at a thermometer, for instance, A thermometer merely just reflects the environment, okay? It's super useful, but it's very much at the effect of the environment, okay? Now, where this can be dangerous is if the environment that it's measuring is not an accurate reflection of really what's going on. Let me give you an example. Sonny, our little 12-month-old, we have a baby monitor that sits in his room, and not only does it kind of watch over his cot, but it measures the temperature in his room. And it was constantly measuring the temperature in his room as, 4 or 5 degrees warmer than it was in the rest of the house. We were confused about it, almost to the stage of like, do we send this back? Is it broken? Until we realized that it was actually sitting underneath an air vent and that it was blowing the hot air directly on it. So where his baby monitor was, in that exact location there, it was feeling the hot air from the temperature from the heater above. When we moved it slightly, it was able to much better reflect the temperature of the entire room. What does this look like? Right now, many of us are getting sucked into, whether it be online, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, where it's feeding us a certain type of information. We maybe are talking with our friends who are also supporting and continuing to feed us that type of information. Maybe you're in other online groups, maybe even the books that you're reading, the shows that you're watching, or all giving you and telling you about a future that is about to be Armageddon, that we're about to have financial breakdown as well. I want you to be open to the idea that that might not be accurate. Now, some of you might be tempted to start to get a little bit angry with me now. You might be having all of this evidence of, again, look how hot it is in this room. And again, the same evidence that, we had for Sunny's room. We were getting the feedback. The thermometer was telling us exactly what was going on. You might have lots of evidence. One of the challenges of when it comes to self-concept and therefore self-identity, with the very thing that creates our destiny, is that it is built upon lots of evidence. You will have evidence to support you. But if you truly want things to be different, I want you to be open to the idea that maybe this is just the evidence that you're seeing. I'm going to talk about how we change some of this over in a moment, and that maybe what you're reading is just the temperature at that moment, not necessarily the temperature that's happening wider. A thermostat, on the other hand, although it still measures the temperature, it's very, very different from that moment on, because it is able, rather than being at effect, is able to actually have an impact on what's going on. So I'm not suggesting for one moment that we stick our head in the sand. In fact, I've done that for periods of my life. It didn't work all that well for me. We need to be able to measure the temperature that's going on, but we need to remind ourselves that we're not at cause of our environment, that we have the ability to change. We have the ability to be able to adapt. I love that word, adaptability. If you wanted to add and tuck something into your self-identity, then being really good at adapting, particularly nowadays, might be a really good thing to put in there. We're going to talk about some other beliefs that might be useful as well. But the idea of seeing yourself as a thermostat rather than a thermometer might be really useful for you. So yes, we look at what's going on in the world. I'm taking very much stock of what's happening globally, financially, all those things there too. But I'm not letting it drive me into fear. During these tricky times, or changing times even, during these changing times, there's always opportunity. And that's part of the identity, as I see myself as somebody that always looks for opportunity. So seeing yourself as a thermostat rather than a thermometer might be something that might be useful for you to incorporate into your self-concept. Now, how do we start to adopt that? I'm going to talk to you about in a moment. I'm going to share, I think, 18 different beliefs that might be helpful for you, and 5 different things that'll kind of help you incorporate this into maybe the new you going forwards. But I want to talk about another concept that might be useful if you're wanting to change or at least influence your destiny going forwards. And this is the idea of, in these times going forwards, making sure that you are creating more than you're consuming. The world, the universe, particularly the economy, always rewards creators more than it does consumers. And this world of ours nowadays, the big businesses, marketing, a lot of what I'm talking to you about here is constantly trying to encourage consuming. Now, what can we do in terms of creating? When you're working with your patients, you're creating. When you're putting together different programs, you're creating. When you're putting together health classes, you're creating. Are you on social media creating content to share with them, or are you on social media consuming content? There are a couple of different headspaces that might help you think about being a creator. Creators love work, okay? Consumers don't. Consumers are the type of people that live to 5 p.m. That's their focus is on 5 p.m. And being a consumer is if you're finding yourself where you're telling yourself, thank God it's Friday, then you're probably in this consumer mode. And that means that either one, you need to get a new job, or maybe you need to start thinking differently about the work that you have. Creators spend their time really wisely. They're very much aware that it is a finite thing that we have. We can't get more time. As consumers, we don't. When we're in the consumer mode, we're much more likely to uh, really want to waste a lot of time, whether it be online, whether it be aimlessly flicking through TikTok, watching shows that are not part of our evolution and our growth. I love social media. I love what it does. I love watching Netflix, but I want to choose shows that inspire me. And speaking of shows that inspire me, I watched a little Netflix documentary the other day called Speed Cubers, about these kids who are amazing on Rubik's Cube. I don't know why I started watching it there too. That was something. It's only 40 minutes long. It's one of the most wonderful stories about these two boys, one of whom is an Aussie, who was just the go-to kid when it came to cubing, and another boy, a young American fella, who is really quite heavily autistic. And his parents, beautiful, beautiful parents who worked very, very hard with him to bring him out of his shell. And part of one of the things they actually got him doing was playing with a Rubik's Cube. And it's the relationship between these two boys, Felix, the Aussie boy, and Max, the American boy. The compassion and love that Felix, this Aussie boy, had for Max, because Max, the autistic boy, the two, very difficult for him to communicate with anyone, has minimal social skills and social interactive skills there as well. But he idolized Felix, this Aussie boy. And for Felix, who was quite young, for him to have the maturity and the compassion, the care that he showed, I won't watch this. It's 40 minutes. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful story. And it's mad to see these kids in their passion just doing something as well. So I'm not saying for one moment we shouldn't be on Netflix, that we shouldn't be on TikTok, but we need to be conscious about it. Are we wasting time, and are we trying to numb ourselves, or are we trying to inspire ourselves there too? So how do you feel about your work? Are you in love with it? If not, how do you become in love with it? Sometimes we just need to kind of get the skills back, put ourselves back in control. We need to see ourselves as the crowd. But maybe it's time to do something new, change jobs, move somewhere different there too. And how are you spending your time there too? So there's two key concepts I want you to think about is, right now, are you behaving as a thermometer? Are you just reflecting back what's coming to you, or are you the thermostat? Are you in control of how you feel and how you want to go into the future? Are you creating more than you are consuming as well? So I want to share with you, and I've shared these beforehand, but there's always lots of new listeners on here. I want to share some new beliefs or stories that also might be useful for you to adopt if you're wanting to change your self-identity, if you're wanting to change who you are going forwards. Maybe you might adopt the belief that you're actually guided in this process. I believe each of us are. I believe that we're on a journey going forwards, and if we listen and look, then the solutions are always there in front of us. I also like the idea of a belief is that everything as it should be, that there is an intelligence in this universe, and maybe that we're not going through a crash at the moment. Maybe it's a correction. It's balancing itself out. I know that there are times inside of my body where I feel hugely energetic, and I know that there's times that I need to rest and sleep. And there's nothing wrong with a sleep phase. It's very important. We're starting to really realize that. And so I like to hold on to the idea is everything as it should be. I also like the idea as a belief that everything happens for me. How does that feel as opposed to things are happening to you, that I'm a victim? I like to think that they're happening for me, that they're encouraging growth and new experience and learning, that help me expand as a human being, that open up my abilities to do more, feel more, express more, compassion, love, all of those type of things there also. I like the idea, similar to that idea that the universe, that everything is as it should be. I like the idea that the universe doesn't make any mistakes. I also love the idea that love is always an option. And this is difficult at times for me when I have at times, particularly through the challenging last few years, got very, very judgmental about other people's thoughts and opinions as well. I want to remind myself that when I'm feeling angry, that love is always an option. I do tell myself every day that I'm responsible for everything that I think and feel. That this, in essence, that's that idea of being a thermostat rather than a thermometer. Okay, my environment is not dictating what's going on. I'm a thermostat. I can change my environment as well. I have to remind myself often too that there's nothing wrong with me. Me, like you, I have the same fears that you do of being rejected, of not being enough. Will people like me? Am I worthy of love? All those type of things there too. These are normal things that happen. If you're not feeling those ways too, it's probably a reflection that you're a sociopath. Okay, so if you don't ever worry about these things, that might be one of the things you probably worry about that as well. So there's nothing wrong with you, and you are enough. Purpose. I've talked a little bit about purpose recently, but maybe the belief that you could have is the purpose of your life is exactly what you're doing now. It's a life that you're living now. You're in it. You're not going to find something tomorrow or the next day. This is part of the purpose. The journey, the search, everything that you're doing right now is absolutely part of it as well. The belief that might be helpful for you going forwards in the next few years or any time as well is that you are deeply loved. Now, I know that you're deeply loved by lots of people, but you're deeply loved by me. As a fellow chiropractor, as a fellow human being, that's all. Like you come preloaded with the idea that you're deeply loved. Um, what about this? The world longs for what you have to offer. It's one I like to remind my coaching clients all the time. I think that's a case specifically for us as chiropractors. The world does long for what we have to offer, a vitalistic, naturalistic, holistic way of thinking about health and life and guiding things and guiding people and families for going forwards. This is something that people really do long for as well. There's nothing that you truly want that you can't have. I gave a whole presentation on this recently at Dynamic Growth, how to get what you really want. I know, and I believe, is that there is truly nothing that you really, really want that you can't have. If it's a desire for yours, this idea of desire I've talked about before comes from the root word of from the heavens, of the Father there as well. If there is a true desire inside of you, I believe you have everything inside of you to get it. So going forwards over these years, regardless, I don't know whether we're about to go into a recession or not. It doesn't really bother me. Okay. I know that I'm a thermostat, not a thermometer. And I know that I'm a creator, not a consumer. Okay. I know that everything is going to be all right. And I also know that inside of this, that there's nothing that I truly want that I cannot have as well. So what about the idea, the belief that hard work feels amazing? Why is it that in so many different ways, what the advertisers and the world is looking for is the hack, the shortcut, all these type of things there too? I was listening to an interview recently with Ryan Holiday, the author, written a whole bunch of books, particularly on kind of Stoic philosophy. I love his stuff. And he was being interviewed, and particularly they were talking about the speed that he reads and how many books he reads. He's an avid reader. And he talks about that. He said, I don't want to read any faster. He said, I love reading, and reading is one of the most enjoyable things that I can do. I want it to actually take longer. He said, the idea to me about bragging about how fast you can read is the equivalent of bragging about how fast you can have sex. That really tickled my fancy. I thought that was really quite amusing. So for me, often when I was reading a book, there was a sense of urgency that I wanted to get through this book so I could get on to the next one. That simple kind of thought from Ryan really changed things for me. I now am in no hurry to try and work my way through a book. I want to savor what's inside of the wisdom and the brilliance inside of here. My life is not going to be measured in some type of, dick measuring contest of how many books that I've read versus you. I'd rather read less books, but just actually soak them all in as well. This idea that hard work feels amazing. That's a belief that might be worth taking on. Worry serves no purpose. Again, this is one for me over the last 2 years that I've had to really work on. It doesn't come easily to me. I'm not saying these beliefs here. These are all beliefs that are important to me. That doesn't mean that they come easily to me as well. Money is easy. Again, that would be a nice one to go into these next couple of years. That money is easy. It comes to you easily as well. That there's plenty of time. That's one that I like to hold on to as well. And that your past is perfect. I'm going to talk about the past in a moment in terms of focus with some ideas, because I've given you all of these beliefs here. And it's one thing to have those, but the next thing, because we've got these beliefs in around being a thermostat versus a thermometer, this idea of seeing ourselves as a creator rather than a consumer, and then a whole bunch of different kind of line items of beliefs through there as well. And for some of you, like, Angus, they feel really lovely. I like the idea of those, but they kind of drop in and disappear. Like, how do I actually hold on to these things? So first of all, understand that it takes repetition to make these changes. We can literally hardwire these in. Man, I've had some great learnings of recent. I was listening to another interview, a guy who'd written a book on neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. And the fellow who was interviewing him was quite skeptical of the idea that he could change his brain. Because I hear people talking about changing my brain. He goes, but I can't change my arm. Like, how can I change my brain? And the author said to him so plainly back, of course you can change your arm. Like, and he said, what do you, like, you can. You change your arm by going to the gym. When you lift weights with repetition, your arm changes. It gets stronger and bigger. There's literally, it changes. And at the moment he said that, the fellow who was interviewing him, I could just see the penny drop. A brain changes with repetition. These ideas of seeing yourself, of changing self-identity that we talked about beforehand, with repetition, then starting to see the results of that will change the brain in a new neuroplastic way that this will become who you are. The first part of this, when I think about believing new things, of implementing these into who you are, there's 5 simple little steps that I want to kind of wind all of this up with. And the first is to realize that it is a choice. And this is difficult because often we're a bit like fish in water. We're just not aware of the environment that we're in. We're not accurately measuring the temperature, not understanding that we're just underneath where the heater is blowing out. That's why it feels so warm, that if I just step to the side, it might be a very different temperature. We have to realize, first of all, that we are constantly telling ourselves stories each and every day, and that these stories are changeable. It all begins there. Without that, if you stay stuck in the idea of, Angus, you just don't know how it is for me. This is how it is. It's different where I live, this part of the world. It's different for me because I'm older, younger, whatever it is. I'm too pretty, I'm not pretty enough. I'm too smart, I'm not smart enough. There'll be these stories that go along with you. And if you hold on to those and don't recognize that these stories are a choice, then believing new things and changing self-identity or self-concept over is impossible as well. One of the things that can be helpful is a daily journaling process that I do from time to time. And that is, I just spend, it's a 10-minute daily journaling process where it's just a thought download. Just write what's inside of your mind, let it freely flow out there for 7 minutes, okay? The other 3 minutes I just spend looking back over it. I look over it with a very certain type of eye. I'm looking for stories in amongst it. I'm trying to separate facts from stories. And what I'm realizing is that many of the things that I'm complaining about, many of the things that I'm having difficulty about, they're just stories. Their interpretations. And when I can see that, it helps me let go of a lot of those things. Daily mental rehearsal of actually seeing things as I want them to be. We know that that can have, mental rehearsal has an impact on real life. There's been plenty of studies of people imagining anything from throwing a basketball to, swinging a golf club, to any different type of quite complex physical tasks, purely by imagining them can actually change the way that we perform in our real life there too. Look for evidence. This is something that I always want to do. As I mentioned to you before, in these times where things are difficult, I want to look for evidence of people who are doing it easily. I want to look for, people who are thriving. During the pandemic, it was interesting for me. I would play golf when I was allowed to, the second half of it there too. And I played golf with a number of people who are in businesses who were just thriving. It was remarkable. It never ceased to amaze me, the number of businesses that have thrived. Now, yes, were there some that had a difficult time? Absolutely. Would not have wanted to be in hospitality or an airline at those times there too. But, from furniture stores to insurance brokers to, different people in the building industry, there were plenty of people that absolutely thrived during that time. And the final thing here is to become future focused. When I talked about this before, as a belief that the past is perfect. When you're looking for evidence going forwards that life can be different, one of the first things that we often do is we look for the past for evidence. Okay, I want to build this new practice. I want to change what I want to do. I want to go online. I want to go and work in Amsterdam, whatever it is there too. And then we'll go, how do I do this? And you look to your past. You can't look to your past when you're wanting to do something that you've never done before. Okay, it won't allow you. In fact, if we continue to look to the past, then you'll continue to get what you've got right now. Somewhere, as adults, from the transition from being a child into being perhaps a teenager there too, we let go and we lose this ability to be future focused, to dream about what we want to be in the future. A policeman, a lawyer, whatever it is that we want to be, we let go of that dream, and all of a sudden we start to focus again on our past, and we let our past guide us. If you are to want to believe new things and adopt the idea of being a creator rather than a consumer, of being a thermostat rather than a thermometer there too, you have to become future focused. You have to hold on to and believe in things that are not just there just yet. These things I know will have a huge impact on your destiny, because your destiny, if we go back to where we started this entire process, that self-concept is destiny, or more precisely, as Nathaniel Brandon says, it tends to be there. Our self-concept of who and what we consciously and subconsciously think we are, our physical and psychological traits, our assets and our liabilities, our possibilities and our limitations, our strengths and our weaknesses. These ideas of what we think we are is what create our destiny. Therefore, if we want to change how this next couple of years are for you, then you need to start to change the way that you think. You need to start to tell some new stories. Folks, that's it. Thanks for listening. As always, thank you for all that you do. Keep saving lives. I look forward to seeing you real soon. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.